Whoa, I don't know what to do with all this free time I have now on stage. Okay, wow, that was amazing. That was really, really awesome. I loved Jaya's presentation. I love it. And Jaya, it was really interesting that you were worried about being quoted about the whole management pornography for, and then you gave the line, and I won't say Verizon, but Verizon. Priceless, really priceless. Okay, moving on to our next session, we're going to talk about the evolution of cyber. And when we sit down to pick the names for the sessions, we actually invest a lot of thought into this, and we really try to capture the essence of what our speakers are going to talk about what the session is going to be about, and also about what message we want to leave you guys with as you hear our speakers and you move on to the rest of your lives. And when we talk about cybersecurity, I think we've made quite a big transition from the old days of just, building perimeters. Just saying, oh, here's a network, let's put a firewall, here's a system, let's put another firewall, and let's stack the firewalls now one on top of the other, and here's the secure architecture. And then the pendulum moved perhaps a little bit too far to the other end. I loved Matt's presentation earlier that said, you got to have a picture of a brain when you talk about machine learning, AI, CNN, and all this stuff. So maybe we took it one step too far in our imagination, because some of the problems are actually simpler problems that require simpler solutions. But there's one specific force in evolution, or there are actually two forces in evolution that drive innovation, right? So the fundamental force is risk. When there's risk, when there's a hostile environment, the organism evolves. It evolves to adapt itself to the threat. And threat can come from predators, which in this analogy for us would be hackers, state actors, and cyber criminals. Or it can come from nature. Nature is the very virtue of what our industry looks like, what our ecosystem is comprised of. And there's one element that we need to remember, and Karen, that was just moderating the previous session, is actually renowned worldwide for bringing this topic to be a discussed topic, and that's the role of hackers as a part of this immune system in the industry, and the importance of promoting the talk around hackers, researchers, people like us, the good guys that are finding these flaws. Troy gave amazing examples of how strong can one person be in identifying such critical flaws and reporting them, but then also in iterating how critical it is that that person with that energy and those capabilities is met and matched by an industry that is welcoming to that message, that knows how to receive that critique, receive that feedback, and actually act upon it. And that is the message that this session is going to promote. And of course, to quote Darwin, survival of the fittest doesn't mean you have to be the strongest. Esty spoke about this, right? You can't just have the best technology. I mean, you have to. You want to have the best technology, but you have to match it also with a human factor. And we, as a society, if we want to be able to survive, if we want to be able to evolve, we have to be willing to accept some changes. And that is our message for this next upcoming session. And to deliver this session and drive this message home, I want to invite, again, another one of my good friends. He has the perfect name for a security guy, for a hacker. Hudi. Like, seriously. Your parents are geniuses, really. And Hudi is special in many ways, especially because in his background, he actually comes from the industry and he transitioned to government. So he has a very holistic view of the world, and I think I'm looking forward to hear what he has to say for us today. So please help me by welcoming on stage Mr. Hudi Zack, the Chief Executive Director of the Technology Unit in the Israeli National Cyber Directorate.
Okay. In the spirit of Matan's comments, the title of this session is Devolution of Cyber. So I thought it would make sense to take you a little bit back in time and review an historic example of another arms race between attackers and defenders and try to conclude some insights out of that. So, in the 1930s, most of the French army's defense efforts were invested in what is known as the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was a huge cluster of concrete fortifications and obstacles built along the French-German border. And it these citadels were connected to lines of transportation and communication to enable transfer of equipment and information. It leveraged all the lessons learned from the First World War, which was characterized as a very static trench warfare. And it was considered to be a genius piece of work that would deter any potential invaders, because it would hold off the German invaders, potential invaders, long enough for the strong French army to arrive and counterattack. What the planners of this huge defense system didn't take into account was that the Germans developed very mobile armed vehicles, which enabled them to move very quickly to the heavily forested areas of southern Belgium and invade France north of the main French defenses and a weak point. After all the time and effort invested in it, the Maginot Line fell with almost no battle, and a month later the German army marched into Paris. So what can we learn from that? I think, and why am I telling you this? Because I think we, in the global cyber community, over the last couple of years have built our own Maginot Lines, fighting the cyber warfare of the past. Every organization has built its own citadel, full of fortifications and firewalls and other defense mechanisms, but totally isolated. There are some mechanisms to transfer information between organizations through the sectorial ISACs or the national certs, but they're all, to the extent that they do exist and the organization is using them, they're confined to the findings that are found within the organization itself or very close to its walls, while the enemy can roam the open country freely, ransack the so-called villages where defenses are weak or don't exist, and more importantly, use its control over the open terrain, if you will, to collect reconnaissance on the more lucrative and protected targets, evaluating different forms of attack, and eventually breaking in using the organization's weak detection capabilities and lack of insightful threat intelligence. Now, all this was bad enough while the threat was created mostly by criminal cyber gangs, aiming to steal money, credit cards, or commercial IP. Yet the fact that these organizations had relatively low sophistication level and their focus on financial gain made the impact of their attacks bearable and enabled reasonably effective mitigation, though a determined perpetrator could still get what he was after. But all this have changed over the last couple of years when state-sponsored attack groups started entering the scene. Now, these guys are capable of destroying countries, and they're already testing their tools toward that end. These groups have virtually no limitation in terms of resource allocation. They have access to the most advanced technologies, and they serve political rather than financial goals, making their targets more diverse, aiming to create damage, chaos, and loss of lives. And this is not a theoretical scenario. This is already happening. Look at what's been happening over the last 5 years in the Ukraine. There've been a wave of attacks on many Ukrainian establishments, businesses, financial institutes, electricity suppliers, political targets, all created or believed to be a product of state-sponsored attack groups with clear political goals in mind. Among other things, these attackers managed to shut down the electricity in large parts of the country and disabled the national treasury's ability to transfer payments for days. Their efforts came into an apex with the large NotPetya attack in 2017, which basically brought the whole of the Ukrainian government and most of its business sector to a halt, shutting down everything from the Chernobyl nuclear reactors monitoring system to international airports, causing damage in billions of dollars. And if that's not enough of bad news, it is believed that this is just a test run, and the actual capabilities of these groups is much higher, enabling them to bring the Ukraine, or any other country for that matter, virtually to its knees. But there's even worse news. And the worst news is that the technological progress we all enjoy brings with it new, terrifying attack surfaces, which will enable sophisticated attackers to create even more damage in ways we cannot even imagine. If you look at this slide, you'll see a list of technological trends. All of them are becoming more and more relevant, more and more prevalent in our lives. And each and every one of them has a huge cyber exposure. I'll not go into every one, but I'll give you a few examples. If you take automotive, for example, until now you could think that an attacker can create damage by shutting down a signaling system of a city. But think of how much more damage and loss of lives can be created if he takes control over the software managing a large fleet of autonomous vehicles. Think of smart medical devices connected to our bodies and the ability to hack them, pacemakers, insulin pumps, and how much damage can be created whether by a widespread attack on these devices or by a targeted campaign on someone specific wearing or using those devices. AI is going to impact every facet of our lives, but this opened the door for sophisticated attackers to manipulate the decision-making process of these systems and use it for his malicious goals. And I can go on and on. So, in light of this new threat, a new paradigm needs to be adopted. We cannot expect businesses, organizations, even large critical infrastructure entities to face this new challenge armed only with the limited skill set, capabilities, and knowledge. They will not hold any better than the Maginot Line citadels. A strong, active, government-driven orchestration of national defense is needed in order to address this new challenge and start changing the balance between defenders and perpetrators. Due to shortage of time, I will not go into everything I think should be done and everything that is being done, but I can assure you that the Israeli National Cyber Directorate is working diligently to address this challenge. And we're cooperating with other national and other defense organizations to build a unified front against this type of attack groups, which, as we all know, don't care about political or geographical borders when they go after their victims. The road we are starting to pave is going to be long and winding. We don't have answers to all the questions yet, and there are a lot of technological, legal, and other obstacles we still need to figure out. But the way we see it, there's no other way to go if we want to address the cyber threat going into the next decade. If we stick with the current defense concepts and architectures, we're going to let the enemy march into our virtual streets and jeopardize the national safety and the well-being of our citizens. And this is something that we should not and cannot afford. And with that in mind,